Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 120. As always, I'm going to start off with a tune. I'm very weak, which is a bit annoying. There we go.
Up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new God sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threats of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's not that Eden for thee? Bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, not tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his soul's reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian guys? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall weigh your gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly proffered laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come thou to search your manhood through all of thankless years, courage with dear bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years.
And that was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. Please do go and subscribe to his channel. He has some great music on there. And welcome to my guests. How are you going, Mitch? How are you going, Adam?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Same old, same old.
That's the phrase.
That's gonna become a meme, I think. But yeah. All right, guys. So did either of you had a first subject for this evening?
I've got one. I'm not sure if either of you wanted to go first, but
I'm certainly never going to go first. I always go last. So.
well, basically, there's this article that's popped up. Some people in the chat have probably seen it. It kind of did the rounds today on Twitter and places like that. It's in an outlet called The Lead, or The Lead. I'm not sure. And right from the get-go, it's kind of funny actually. It's the headline is "Black and Brown Hikers Are Taking Back Britain's Countryside," and it kind of opens as a bit of a carry-on. I don't know if you remember, we brought this up a while back where they put up the signs to Mecca in the Lake District. The sort of developing part of that story that I think a lot of people didn't know at the time was that those signs weren't legal, right? So they sort of put them up just to do a photo shoot with them, and then they sort of took them down.
That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah, but it's so they actually cover that like right in the beginning of the article. It says, quote, "Having signs pointed towards that Mecca might seem like a small thing, but it's a really thoughtful idea." This person tells them, "It makes me feel like the national park is welcoming us with open arms. Something as simple as this can make us feel very welcome by the outdoor community." I mean, this is of course ridiculous because they were just put up for a photo shoot. They're not actually there. I don't know why they'd say that.
Adam, what do you think the chances are that in Saudi Arabia, any of the big trails there have signs pointing to Canterbury Cathedral or Rome? Yeah, exactly.
And I wouldn't expect them to either. That's the thing.
No, exactly right.
But it's like, funny enough, you probably wouldn't even be able to get away with putting up signs to Canterbury Cathedral where I am, near Canterbury.
Which you would think would be fairly natural, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but of course that'd be largely because of the bureaucracy. But you would also get the typical atheist shits coming up out of the woodwork and whatever. But it kind of just. So anyway, the person who didn't write this article, the article was actually, I think, written by a white woman. Oh no, she is an ethnic, you could say, but I don't think she's Muslim. But anyway, it talks about this woman, this lady called Sidra, who's a 20-year-old apprentice from Coventry, and member of this Muslim hiking group, and she got to spearhead this team up between Wiggle and Adidas in making these hiking friendly prayer mats. And it's like, the whole it talks on a bit further on. I'll post the actual URL to the article in the chat so people can.
I mean, it's doubly shit, Adam, because on the one hand, all right, Muslim men are in many places used to walking over mountains and this kind of stuff, although whether they do it for recreation is a different matter. But Muslim women certainly don't do that anywhere in the Muslim world, as far as I'm aware, and would be looked at askance if they did.
Yeah, John Best said, did you see the Muslims playing music and skinning sheep somewhere? I did hear about that. There's actually another sort of similar example to that, not quite as ghastly, but not far off, a bit further down in this article. But
I'd be a bit worried if I was like a sheep farmer in one of these British national parks if all these Muslims were walking through the place. But I mean, in Minecraft, of course.
And so they kind of they talk about that for a bit, and I kind of sat there and thought to myself, how many 20-something-year-old English men or women would get that sort of opportunity to team up between these two giant brands?
No.
And exactly.
Certainly no straight white men.
No, I mean, I actually used to buy stuff from Wiggle, but for the bicycle and stuff like that, sure. I won't anymore. But they go on one of this, and I saw a bunch of white people retweeting this. They thought it was really amazing stat where it says that you know, sort of like 10 to 15% of Britain is covered by nature reserves or national parks, but only 1% of visitors to these are black, Asian, or minority ethnic.
Because they don't give a shit about that crap.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
But, you know.
It's not their land. Like from the very headline where it says like taking back Britain's countryside, you know, it kind of speaks to
how can they take it back when they're not British?
Yeah, they, you know, they didn't have it in the first place, and it kind of all reeks of their interest in the countryside is one of ethno-narcissism rather than one of actually appreciating the countryside. You know, it's like you can see as well. You can go around areas which have had a lot of Indian, or we will say Pakistani people moving, like South Asian.
Yeah.
And the first thing they'll do when they move into these houses is like put concrete slabs over the front garden, and they just turn it into a driveway.
Yep.
You know, they don't seem to be outdoorsy people. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but
I'm sure a small minority of them are outdoorsy people, but that small minority could very easily join British hiking groups and all that kind of stuff, and they're not going to get any problems if they want to do that.
No. But it's like, here's another paragraph, right? It says, there is a tendency for divisions like this to become cyclical and self-fulfilling. Negative encounters in rural spaces, coupled with homogenous messaging in the media and advertising, can cause certain myths about nature to be internalized. Among blacks and ethnic minority communities, there is a sense that outdoor pursuits are not for us, and limited narratives that black people don't go walking, that open water swimming is for white women, and that minority groups are only comfortable in cities are perpetuated.
But hang on, Ammon, look, I know you know this, but like, I mean, the obvious point to say here is like the media in the UK is totally pro-immigrants.
Yeah, like 50% of the adverts,
anti-Anglo-Celtic actual British people.
Yeah, like 50% of the advertising on any given evening on British television is you know, non-white. There's not a single TV show that is all white. You know, that I saw this week, they've got this Queen Charlotte show coming out, and that's all black. Like, not all black, but you know, they've got blacks as a lot of the sort of top things, including the Queen herself.
Queen Charlotte, the king's wife, you're talking about, yes.
And in the same week that this happened,
who was German, I believe, by the way.
Yeah, in the same week that this happened, there is some black guy who's been given the reins on either a BBC show or a Channel 4 show, I can't remember, where his stated goal is specifically to elevate black talent. So, I mean, I don't know of any homogenous media. If they can point me towards it, I mean, I'll happily
go watch it.
Yeah.
If only there was anything in Britain that was pro Anglo-Celtic actual British people, I'd go watch it, but there isn't.
And it says as well, when it says like causes certain myths to be perpetuated and internalized, like those myths had to come from somewhere. Like when Windrush first came over, at no point when they were first getting off the boats did anyone be like, oh, they're not going to leave Hammersmith, are they? Like that's not, you know, that's a ridiculous. It is ridiculous. They cry on about they cry on about the whole myths thing for a couple more things. They cite a 2011 report from the University of Leicester that said there was frequent, alarming forms of racism that affect ethnic minorities in the countryside.
Like what? Did they give examples?
Well, yes, actually, I'll have you know, you bigot. There is an example.
Go on then.
In 2021, Patriotic Alternative, a group with far-right and neo-Nazi members, waved racist banners reading, "We will not be replaced," and "White Lives Matter" at a family summer camp in the Peak District.
Because, you know, obviously we will not be replaced, and White Lives Matter are like things you can't possibly say. Because you can say Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. I didn't even know they did wave a sign that says "We will not be replaced." Did they? I thought it was just
White
Lives Matter. That's the only one I've ever seen them fly, and I actually pay attention to them. So
yeah, no, I don't know, but it's craziness.
Yeah, I think they also basically booked out an entire campsite, so like not really many other people were there to see that. So I don't.
Yeah. So you mean they paid for a campsite and then went and stayed there, and like business went on and
yeah. Yeah, and they had like, and I don't even know where the banners came into this. I know they have waved one of those banners, but whatever. And it also says in May last year, racist graffiti, including anti-black and anti-Pakistani slurs, and the words "race traitor" was painted onto signs at Magnolia Park and Nature Reserve in Hawkwell, Essex.
Oh my God.
Now I've been told on good authority that Hawkwell's a very white area, and that particular park is absolutely minuscule. So I and who even uses the term race traitor anymore? I don't even hear like, you know, people on the actual, like, you could call it racist right, you know, me mates. I don't even
I
hear
hear
them.
the left. I hear the left using it sometimes. I never hear the right using it. I do hear the left using it. And the left use it as "I am a race traitor," you know, like a left-wing woman who is in a interracial relationship will say, "I'm a proud race traitor."
Yeah,
you will sometimes get that, but you don't get the right using it at all.
Yeah, so there's something. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that turned out that was just a hoax, like a lot of them are.
99% of them are hoaxes, really. Let's be honest.
Yeah. There's actually a section in it called, there's actually a section in the article called "Colonialism in the Countryside," which is an absolute banger.
How can you do colonialism in Britain's own countryside?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute because it's kind of funny. But like, let me cover this one paragraph here that goes into what John Best said earlier. Nigerian-born Enoch Ediemi, well, his first name's pretty base, but co-founder of Black Scottish Adventurers, recently shared his experiences of hiking with a large group of black men, revealing they were constantly subject to spurious complaints about littering, it puts in scare quotes, condescension and demands to stop playing music. And he says, I quote, "Why should I turn off my music? Just because white Scottish people enjoy nature one way, that doesn't mean black people have to enjoy it exactly the same way."
Yeah, I mean, look, I lived in Africa for 15 years, Adam, as you know, and the one thing I noticed about most African villages, unless they were very, very remote and very, very traditional, was the whole damn place was surrounded by litter because these guys just chuck stuff everywhere. They just do. It's their culture.
Yeah.
And the music thing, we all know, is also true. I mean, I don't know about you, but like, whilst I might go into in my younger days, I might have gone into a nightclub playing loud reggae music or something. I don't really want to hear it when I'm walking through the Yorkshire Dales, you know?
Yeah, it's a bit, it is, it's like, the funny thing is, this came after this giant Twitter spat, right, that happened with, you remember this lady Ash Sarkar?
Oh, I know. Well, I wouldn't call her a lady, but yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, female chungus maybe, but she had this whole thing where she was having this spat with people where she was saying that actually, like, ethnic people playing boom boxes and loud music in public spaces is actually like cultural enrichment. And then we see it again here. So, you know, clearly that, I mean, is that a myth? As I said earlier, no, this stereotype exists for a reason.
It's a lie, basically. I mean, like almost all of this stuff, it's a lie. I've left Sonny Jim's chat up on the chats, you can see, for a reason. Sonny Jim, walking is not for peasants. Walking is for infantrymen.
Well, I mean, if you're not a peasant, you're probably going in a carriage, aren't you? So
yep. No. Walking is for infantry soldiers carrying 60 to 80 pounds, and we do it easy, and we're men. But there you go. Traditionally, of course.
So, but yeah, and it's like, you know, that this is, you know, confronting people about littering. Oh, and of course, on the littering point, you know, there was a thing that came out a few years back that people still get really sensitive about if you bring it up. But there was papers where they basically showed that most of the plastic in the ocean comes from a series of rivers, and none of them are in Europe. They're all in Africa and Asia.
Yep, absolutely. We've that's been common knowledge for years, but absolutely correct, Armin. Yep.
And so yeah, you're probably right. This seems to be an intractable part of their culture that they can't even leave behind. You know, when they're born in Britain, and they're supposed to be just as British as anyone else, they still seem to hold to these behavioral patterns from their homeland, which they've never known.
Yeah, which they just like, oh, I've finished with this drink, chuck a bottle away. I've finished with this food, chuck a packet away. They just do. But Africa is really sad, man. I got to tell you, like, even in like rural areas, just outside cities, you'll just find litter everywhere. If you go to a very, very remote and traditional village, and there are fewer and fewer of those these days, of course, then you might find people keep it fairly tidy. But that is not the way most people behave at all.
Yeah. So anyway, I won't carry on with this for too long, because this is only the first subject, and
it's most interesting, and the idea that like somehow or another, like the British countryside doesn't belong to the British people, like strikes me as really odd. If you go to India, for example, I don't think you will find all that many signs pointing to British colonial buildings, including hospitals and schools and dams and etc., saying this was built by the British. I don't think you're going to find many of those in India.
Yeah. In fact, India now seems to devote a lot of its time and money to making media output that is specifically anti-British Empire.
Well, India spent quite a long time falling closer into the British sphere. Like the Indian Air Force at one stage was doing exercises with the RAF. But of course, since the American-led pedophile, idiot, moron, old age pensioner Biden war on Ukraine, which has driven Russia and everybody else into China's arms, India has become increasingly anti-Western. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. And it's like, so like, I mean, there was a GIF I posted a little while ago that I thought was quite funny, where it's got the Indian woman in front of the car, and the red coat runs up with the log and smashes her over the head. But that's a scene from a film called I think it's called RRR.
Yeah, I'm not going to even. I won't watch that because it's very anti-British.
Yeah,
very anti-British.
And it kind of also annoyed me that like all these white, presumably British people were
white British and American people were saying how great it was, and as soon as I looked at what it was about, I said, "No, I'm not watching that."
Yeah, it's just another crummy pod.
But as far as I'm concerned, Britain is great, England is great, Britain is great. Fuck the rest of you. I'm sorry, that's my opinion.
So anyway, you're going to love this next part of the article. The subtitle is called "Colonialism in the Countryside," and it says
in the British countryside. How can you be colonial in your own countryside?
Well, this is the thing. They get really slippery with where exactly they're talking about and who they're talking about. And I think a lot of this is just this almost reads like the pseudoscience from Shaniqua's Twitter feed, right? So it says. Acts of hate, like examples detailed above, stem from the ideas of purity and national identity. For those who believe that only white people have a claim to Englishness, it follows that quintessentially English landscapes would be vigilantly guarded with the same exclusionary vigor.
Let me say now, Adam, only white Anglo-Celtic people have a claim to Englishness.
Yes.
As even Sargon of Akkad, what's his real name that he uses now?
Carl Benjamin.
Carl Benjamin. As even Carl Benjamin said on a recent stream, basically to be English or British, you have to be Anglo-Celtic. And if you're not, you might be able to join if you totally support us. But otherwise you're not. And I'm not even sure you might be able to join, to be honest.
Yeah, when people get funny about the whole white distinction, I always just correct it and say that all English people are white, but not all whites are English.
Exactly. We're Anglo-Celtic. English and British people are all Anglo-Celtic. All of us.
And it carries on in quotes. In a lot of philosophy of the early environmental movements, there was a parallel between the idea of pristine landscapes and the idea of pristine races, says Beth Collier, psychotherapist, ethnographer, and founder of nature-based community Wild in the City. She continues.
There's a selection of things that don't work together, but all right.
It continues. Founder of it's ridiculous. It continues. This fueled the dispossession of lands for a lot of indigenous people, and the idea that they were a blight on the landscape and needed to be removed in order for these landscapes to be pure and enjoyed. I think unconsciously and sometimes consciously that mindset still exists. There is a perception of a green and pleasant land, obviously from Jerusalem, and encountering people of color in these spaces is seen as an intrusion. Well, like the funny thing is that when it talks, like, because it gets a bit funny because they talk about early environmental movements. Almost all of the early environmental movements I can think of, and I know quite a few, were native. They were here in the UK. They were here in Britain, I should say. They weren't really focused on the places we were, we had just as imperial things, except for study.
Except in Africa.
Yeah, and most of them were purely for they were more for study and interest. They weren't really, and it kind of plays this funny thing where they're talking about the English landscape, they're talking about the English countryside. And then they talk about the idea of keeping people of color out of these spaces, and it's like, right, but when most of these groups were working, a lot of the people involved in these would never have even seen a black or brown person. Like it doesn't seem to make much sense. There's a lot of context that's missed out here, mostly because I think this is all bullshit. But
Adamant, my father was born in inner South London. In 1933, and he did not see a black person in England until he came home from the army in 1954, and then he saw a very occasional one in London.
Yeah.
He had never seen a black person in England until then.
Yeah.
And that is the truth, because there were virtually no black people in Britain prior to certainly 1949 at earliest. There were none. All this stuff about there were black people in England. I mean, yeah, all right, there might have been 3 or 4 or something scattered over the whole country, but there basically were none. And there were never any black slaves in England because slavery was illegal in England for most of the whole period.
Yeah. Well, this is, of course, I mean, this is another area where it gets confused a lot. We've seen Haiti in the news cycle recently, and they talk with Haiti. They will, they like to bring up how Haiti was like the first, but they banned slavery before Britain did, and it kind of ignores the fact that
they also killed huge numbers of French women and children. But I mean,
but they only banned slavery in Haiti. They didn't but slavery was already banned in Britain, as it was in lots of other places in Europe. What we banned in the 1830s was the slave trade.
The slavery in Britain was illegal at the very latest from something like the late 1770s in the UK by high court decisions. The actual words they used was the error of England is 2-3 to allow slavery. So there were no slaves in Britain from at least pre the American War of Independence.
Yeah.
And there were very few before that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, slavery was basically made into a sin in the 11th century in the UK as well. So, and it's kind of I mean, the thing is, and some people will say, I think Carl Benjamin has said, they ain't thanked us for ending slavery. It's like, well, we don't need it. No, but we don't need it. Who cares? We did it. We did it because it felt good to us to do.
Yeah, it was good for Anglo-Celtic and European people.
Yeah, we concerned ourselves with clearing our own conscience. We didn't actually care about them.
Absolutely, 100% right. I totally agree with that.
So it kind of gets a bit funny that they say, hang on, I missed off a bit. It says here, Collier believes that there is an unwritten social contract that keeps black people and ethnic minorities confined to cities and urban spaces. So to step beyond those confines is unfamiliar and challenges the status quo of who belongs there. She points to the legacies of colonialism and slavery, especially the long history of non-white groups being accused of primitivism for having a close relationship with nature. It kind of, when she says like an unwritten social contract that like keeps them confined to the cities, as if we're all like out of someone showed me the scene from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, as if we're like casting the ward over Hogwarts to keep them out of Snowdonia and the Lake District.
Yeah. They're not allowed to go and count.
No, they couldn't leave Birmingham.
British mountains or hills. No, not a chance.
The thing is, I've been to Snowdonia, I think 3 times, and it's quite busy, right? But when I go there, it's all white. I don't think I've ever seen a brown or black person there ever. It's only up the road from Birmingham.
It doesn't interest them.
No, it's only and I have to drive quite a long way. I have to get past London, which kind of cuts off the southeast where I am from the rest of the country. And I have to, it's a long old way. They only have to catch the coach over from Birmingham or the bloody train. It's a piece of piss for them, but they don't.
I wonder why.
And it's also like, again, this idea of primitivism, this really does my nut in. I talked about Avatar, right, the movie, a couple of episodes ago. And Avatar kind of pushes this idea of like
does.
The romantic savage, right? This sort of Rousseauian notion. And I remember there being a meme around where people were like taking the mick and they were saying that like the commander, the military guy in that film is like, even if the humans lose and get driven off, they will still colonize the stars. But these people will stay on this planet, on this rock, and not achieve any level of greatness until their species eventually is killed out by some cataclysm. And that's the thing is, the stupid thing about the primitivism claim about how they're accused for being too close to nature. We had a close relationship with nature, but the difference is that ours was based on a mastery of our land, and theirs is just them vibing, dwelling in it, doing nothing, achieving no level of substantive being beyond what they are now, and not being focused towards it either.
I think you're totally right, Armand. But I mean, a lot of this comes from America, because like Britain gets all of its modern culture pretty much secondhand and from America. And there is a thing in America now that actually started, I suppose, back in the 80s, at least, maybe even the 70s. Where the Native Americans, i.e. the Red Indians, were people who looked after their land and all the rest of it. And maybe they did to some degree when there were not many people on the land. They maybe did, although I suspect if they did, it was more because there weren't many people on the land than anything else. These days...
Oh, sorry.
No, Mitch, carry on, man.
I was going to say they were hunter-gatherers, so they didn't even really have much in the way of agriculture or any sort of mass urbanization like we did. So it was easy for them to take care of the environment.
But there were some Native American agriculturalists in some places, but yeah, by and large, you're right. They were hunter-gatherers, sure.
I mean, depends. I mean, the likes of the Huron and the Iroquois, if I'm pronouncing that right, Confederacy in like states like New York and Ohio and areas like that. I can't imagine they would have had much more of agriculture as so much as hunter gathering. Whereas, let's say, I don't know. I think there were native civilizations or something like that in California where they couldn't really hunt.
There was stuff like the Pueblo culture and what have you that was more farming, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because in like Southern California, for example, there's not really much to hunt compared to what you'll get in like Northern American states, like the old woodlands of like New York State, Ohio, as well as parts of Canada, like where the Huron used to live. So,
I mean, look, the thing is, like, even in the late 1870s, like at the time of the Battle of Little Big Horn, when Custer stupidly got his whole regiment, half his regiment, killed, just because he was stupid, really, in my opinion. But even then, the Sioux and the Cheyenne were basically hunter-gatherers, as you say, Mitch. So yeah, what you're saying is not wrong.
Yeah, it's like, for example, there's this one gaming mod I looked at where it's like, because I'm a big gamer, there's this one mod where it has like a medieval America where, modern America has some sort of like cataclysmic event and everyone in the world is relegated to Middle Ages. And it basically puts down the Native Americans, especially like the likes of the Cherokee and whatnot, as basically nomadic steppe raiders. Because the thing was, because essentially the law goes that the Native Americans were unable to do any sort of agriculture like what the white farmers could do in say Oklahoma, for example. So they just turned to either hunter gathering or they just turn into like nomadic horse archers sort of thing, like bison hunting and whatnot.
Well, I mean, the bison, the American buffalo were absolutely essential to the American Plains Indians. I mean, like, you don't have to be a great historical fundy to know that. But yeah, again, like, I mean, we're wandering away a bit from Adam's point about all these third world immigrants going on about the English countryside, but in their own countryside, they didn't do this stuff, By and large, they didn't. I'm sorry. Like, you get loads of American docudrama shit these days that, the guy will kill the bison and then pray for him. You don't really get American Indians driving whole herds of bison over a cliff and not praying for them at all. But it's hypocritical left-wing nonsense, like most of this shit is. Really.
Well, Mitch, you might know this one. American Krogan talked about it in one of his videos on Red Dead Redemption 2, the computer game, where he was talking about how they sort of show like the sort of bison poachers that are sort of like recklessly killing them and then hardly stripping anything off of them and leaving the carcasses out in the sun.
Yeah, they all die. They just chuck out the tongues. They cut out the tongues or something like that.
Well, they were showing them as being all white, the poachers, and like the Native Americans getting really upset about disrespecting their bison. It's it's not as if like European people did play a role in sort of near extermination on that continent of certain animal species.
Of course they did, because there was money to be made, and humans will always do stuff where money is to be made.
But they did also protect a lot of them in a way that the natives probably wouldn't have.
Yellowstone was an American white dude's national park, as far as I know.
Yeah, Roosevelt.
Yeah,
Theodore Roosevelt, wasn't it?
And this will probably be the last bit of this article I read, but it kind of ties into this quite well. It says upon wait, am I reading the right bit? Here we go. Another issue is that traditional ecological knowledge is appropriated by mainstream environmental and conservative movements. Collier says black people are dispossessed of nature, while simultaneously white people are taking their knowledge and refashioning it exclusively theirs. Quote, "This is done to prove that white people are better custodians, that they uniquely know how to look after nature, where black people harm nature or don't understand nature," Collier adds. "The impact is alienation, exclusion, and missing out on the multifaceted benefits from physical and mental health to cultural enrichment and environmental understanding of spending time in nature." Now, I don't know if you remember, Duke, from like 2 streams ago, we were talking about like wildlife and animals and nature and stuff like that quite a lot. We were talking about hunting and we were talking about
yes, I remember that. Yeah.
All manner of things. Yeah, and you talked a bit about Africa, and we talked a bit about like the game reserves. And one of the things I remember reading, I was reading quite a random book actually. It was it's called, I'm trying to see if I can see it. It's called something like Africa Solo. That's it, by Mark Beaumont, the long distance endurance cyclist. And he cycled from Cairo to Cape Town and set a world record. for the time he did it in.
That's quite impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, and he talks. He's like, funny enough, he gets quite like race realist over the course of the trip because he goes through like Ethiopia and he's like, wow, that age we sent here and it's just a shithole, and people have to warn you that the kids throw rocks at you as you cycle through the town and stuff like that. But he's going to these giant game reserves in places like I forget where it is.
East Africa, Central Africa.
It's northwest of South Africa, sort of further up the west coast there.
So Kenya, Tanganyika, Tanzania.
I think it was Tanzania.
Yeah,
and he talks about going to these giant game reserves, and they're all run by Germans, right? and you know, and stuff like that. They're all generally European run.
Well, Tanzania was originally a German colony, so fair enough. But which Britain took over after World War I. But it's insane to me that anyone can have the least understanding of history and think that third world people, even if you're talking about the Chinese, for God's sake, the idea that third world people of any description will protect their own wildlife is just ridiculous, because they won't.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is,
the Japanese started it earlier than most, and do now protect their indigenous wildlife. But the Japanese were the most westernized in some respects of all the Asian peoples.
Yeah, I will. I mean, the only thing I'll finish off by saying on this article is that for all their crying about victimhood status, they use the Associated Press style guide, which is to always capitalize Black and Asian and never capitalize white.
Yeah, I'd work the other way around, to be honest. But yeah,
yes, me too. But yeah, you know, and the article literally opens with a 20-year-old Muslim talking about how she got to work, how she got to lead a team up between Adidas and Wiggle. Like, you know, these are not opportunities that, like, you know, white 20-year-olds get. So
yeah, even a white woman probably wouldn't get that opportunity. As for the chances of a straight white man getting that opportunity, absolutely, totally zero.
Yeah.
Zero.
And what do they do with those opportunities? They use them to cry about how disprivileged they are. Yeah, this is
even
pathetic.
though the entire British media is totally pro third world immigrants and totally anti Anglo-Celtic, real British, English, Scottish, Northern Irish, and Welsh people.
Yeah.
That's the fact of it. They are totally anti our own people and totally in favor of the people who are I can't say invading because this is YouTube, but coming into our country in enormous numbers against the will of most of the local Anglo-Celtic population.
Yeah, like someone said recently, they said we often hear the phrase "we were never asked," but to an actual extent, we were often asked, and we always said no, and they did it anyway.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, you earlier talked about Canterbury Cathedral. I remember my dad taking me to Canterbury Cathedral when I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something. And the only thing I really remember about it was the Black Prince's armor over his tomb. And the Black Prince was a great British general who would have made a great British king if he'd have lived.
Yeah, died before his time.
Yeah, 100%. And that, to me, was like one of my original links to British history. There's this dude. Here I am, and I'm an Englishman. And there's this dude who was the Black Prince, for God's sake, who won this great battle at Poitiers. And I don't know, man. I just think we need more of that.
Yeah.
To be honest.
So I'll throw the article up in chat a second time. People can read it in their own time. I haven't read the whole thing, just bits and pieces from it. It's actually quite long. But yeah, that's basically all I have to say on it. It's It's quite funny. I thought, to be fair, it's
yeah, funny, ha ha, rather than
well, yeah, but it
yeah.
also serves as a bit of a lesson. Is that like if you strip these like I've been quite critical of this idea of like putting the woke away that people say. I can't stand the term woke. People should stop using it, but for argument's sake.
Yeah, I understand why people use it because it explains a certain way of thinking. But all right.
Yeah, but it's like people talk about that putting all this back in the bowl, and I do wonder for the longest. I don't think it's possible for a bunch of different reasons. One of the reasons is that I don't think after you've given these people their megaphones, you could just so easily take this stuff away from them. I think they'd
we
flip out.
we can never put this back in the bowl. We have to break it.
Yeah.
The bowl has to be broken. We can't
Yeah.
put it back in the bowl. We've got to break it.
But what this does also kind of show, and a lot of stuff like this, is that these people are pretty weak. I'm going to say, like there's like people often talk about like the idea of like them having a will to power, that they come here and see themselves as colonizers in their own way. And I think there is an aspect to that. But what a lot of this stuff kind of shows is that they're very second-rate colonizers. They're not actually really capable of anything. They kind of had to be handheld by our elites and our regime to.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you say elites, obviously there's a huge inverted commas around the elites, but
yeah, they're not an elite in a way.
They're not any sort of real elite, but yeah absolutely. Yeah, look, I just think we have to fight them at every possible stage, and we are going to lose for a long time, but eventually we might win. Because we have the real, like the people who really love the English countryside are people like Adam and Mitch and myself. They're not these twats.
Yeah. I mean, I do also think that, because a lot of people say the phrase, and I agree with this, there's probably no way back. The only way out is through. The funny thing is that if you can fix the demographics, which you can, Academic Agent actually wrote a Substack on this the other day, which I do actually really agree with, where he basically brought up historical examples about how demographics can be fixed quite easily and have been at various points. One of the examples I bring up, which he didn't, is Kazakhstan. Right, when the Soviet Union fell, Kazakhstan was like, I think 30 to 40% Kazakh. It's now 60-something% Kazakh. So, they've started kind of in a way restoring their own sort of ethnos. They're not very far, but they're getting there, and they haven't really been putting in a strict amount of effort, nor have they had to resort to any violence or anything. But the thing is, if you can lead the British ethnos out the other side to safety, and onto bright new things, the Britain they would create, even if it's new, would still, because culture is so heavily tied to ethnicity and race, what comes out the other side would look so much like what came before that people probably shouldn't get too upset about leaving stuff behind.
I kind of agree with that, and I know all the time we get people saying, like, modern Englishmen and modern Britons are so more left-wing than their earlier in the 20th century or 19th century cousins. I don't actually think that's changed all that much, to be honest. I think the leadership has changed. The shit that the mainstream media puts on has changed. I don't really think the ordinary people have changed anything near as much as they think they have.
They've I always like, one of the reasons I don't like the sort of punching down on the working class that happens in some aspects of the right. So, well, I should probably actually head this off by saying that I am an elitist, and I do believe in elitism, and I do believe that you should believe in hierarchy, and this idea that
so do I to some degree, but also there is a working class elite that used to be, for example, the British NCOs and foremans and all these kind of people, and they were very right wing.
Yeah. Yeah, someone posted a picture of some skinhead shouting at a police officer, and they said that is colour sergeant physiognomy there. And I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, yeah, they were ultimately the guys like the loudmouth working class guy that built the British Empire ultimately. So
Yeah,
he
would stand there with everyone dead around them, and like the guys all taking cover, and the company sergeant major would stand up and say, "We're gonna charge, boys," and they would beat any number of blacks and browns just because the sergeant major had led them forward. And I think that's a real person, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think like the thing is that, to bring this back to the point I was trying to make, but I wanted to add a little disclaimer on the front. I still don't completely like all the punching down that sometimes happens all over the place, because when people look at like councillor house people, right, or chavs or whatever it is, and they look at these people that are quite dysgenic, a bit degenerate, and they kind of seem to see those people as being of that form at all times, and they kind of seem to ignore that those people have largely been left behind by an elite that should have cared for them. And they're in a state of moral decay because of it. And it wouldn't take much for someone to scoop those people up, renew that class anew almost, and lead them back out into the sun essentially.
Adam, and I think that's beautiful. I mean, like, I'm sorry, I totally agree with you. There are people on the right who will say, some daughter of a single mother in some northern or Midlands town or southern town these days, who is being exploited by Pakistanis. It's easy for white people to say, they're just white sluts and blah blah blah. That isn't right. That isn't what we should do. We should be trying to rescue those people. We should be trying to say, like, a child is a child. I don't care if she's the child of an aristocrat or the child of a high class, middle class, or low class, middle class, or a working class person. If they come from a women only family, a single mother or something like that, we should be trying to save every single one of those people, because they're our people.
Yeah, I mean, I've brought this up a bunch of times, but I remember this. That guy, St. Harrison, I think he's back on YouTube now. He's one of the PA guys, but he posted on his old YouTube channel. He posted a bunch of old BBC Three documentaries, and one of them was about a single mother living in a street where she was like the last working. They were like the last white family on the street, and she worked as a carer or some such, and she couldn't move out because she needed to be able to get to her job, and she couldn't move to the outskirts of town because all the other white people moving there had made it too expensive for her. And her son was skipping school because he was being bullied relentlessly in school. And her daughter was converted to Islam because she was also, essentially being groomed, not in the sort of, the sexual abuse way, but just in the sort of typical, sort of falling in line with.
Sounds like sexually abused way to me, but all right.
Well, maybe. I mean, we don't know, but I'm assuming it was just, and this single mother was just completely. And people will look at her and see her as like white trash, and I just hate that, because I just see her as someone who's completely lacking in moral guidance, but from anyone. There's no community around her to assist.
She doesn't have a father. She doesn't have a dad. That's the sort of people that all of us on the right should be trying to help.
Yeah. And it's like, as that's what the right should also be focusing on moving forward. Is we should be building institutions that give people solutions to problems where the regime just is not interested and does nothing but discard these people. And the regime fears this, because you see articles from them all the time where they'll say, like, in relation to boys, they'll say, the far right is radicalizing people by opening up to them and being their friend, right? It's so they this is what they fit, and this is that's a good line of attack. It's a hard thing to break open, but
100, mate. Look, if they're a white person and they're in trouble and they're having difficulties, absolutely 100%, as Sonny Jim said in the chat, well said, Alan. We on the right should be like their allies and looking after them as much as we possibly can be, because that's how we preserve our people. It's 100% correct, and anybody who doesn't think it is an idiot, to be honest. Like, it's even noble, like some poor bloody unmarried white mother trying to protect their children from Islamic grooming gangs, etc. If you don't help them, then you are not a good white person. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And Raw Biscuit said in chat as well, he said the plebs are required for an elite to exist. Well, yeah, I mean, the kings of old literally drew their power from the from the energy of the mass, essentially.
Yeah, but just also the other thing we always get wrong is there is not just the kings and the plebs. In the middle, there is the English yeoman, there are the English longbow, warbow archers in the 100 Years' War, the sergeants in the Napoleonic Wars and the Crimean War, and all these guys are in the middle. It's not just two groups; it's at least three. And you can move through those if you are good and lucky. In Britain. Not in any other country, but in Britain, yes, you can.
Yeah. But, I suppose that's basically my subject tied up.
No, excellent, man. That was one of our best ever introductions, Alan. But, I don't expect any less from you because, you're always... You're a good man. You are just a good man.
Same.
Good Anglo-Celtic man, I must say. All right, Mitch. Mitch, did you have the first subject you wanted to bring up? And what on earth is that avatar this week?
I didn't really have a new one. I just went back to an old one.
Do you know what that is? Is it from some movie, or is it I don't know?
A guy from an Instagram page who calls himself Byronic Aesthetic. I asked him, he doesn't know where it comes from. I'm assuming it's just a Russian guy with a gas mask on it, judging by the Kalashnikov.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, all right. No, I look at it and see that as a Kalashnikov. Yeah, it's one of those Russian rubber suits, which I would not have wanted to wear in the 1980s. But all right, fair enough. Did you have a subject you wanted to bring up, Mitch?
There's a whole shtick about this push for us to accept millions of Sudanese people in, which
I know. Yeah, I do. That was one I wanted to bring up. So
it's in terms of the war in Sudan, it looks like it's really heating up, where you got hundreds of civilian casualties because the Sudanese air forces literally having to bomb their own capital city against the rebel forces. And then it's not just the capital city, it's also the southwest of the country, I think, has also just joined the rebels. So it looks like it's not a simple case of a coup that gets crushed in 5 minutes. It's going to be a full-blown civil war. And of course, if you take Morgoth's law, which is regardless of what the crisis is, whether it be a war in Ukraine or wherever, the end result will be mass immigration from the third world, especially of the non-white majority.
To Britain, yeah. Why on earth? I've watched some of the videos of the Royal Air Force evacuating, in inverted commas, British people from Sudan, and almost all the British people I see them evacuating from the Sudan are very Muslim looking to me, to be honest.
Yeah, it's I've also heard the I think it was something like a lot of these so-called British citizens who had to be evacuated had to. I think it was rely on. I think it was the Germans or the Americans that had to go on the flights to get to Britain or something, because on one hand, we're also like the RAF is also apparently they're having to also evacuate actual Sudanese people who aren't. Who don't have anything to do with the UK.
because of the BBC. The BBC has insisted, the BBC, which only survives from an enormous tax on British old age pensioners, it's insisted that the RAF evacuates Sudanese from their own country. Why does the British Royal Air Force have to evacuate Sudanese from their own fucking country? I'm sorry, I don't get it.
Yeah, was this what Hitchens was talking about on that clip you posted earlier in the Discord? I saw the guy was commenting about a Hitchens interview on one of the BBC talk shows or something, and he was kind of they brought up Ukraine and they were bringing up, I forget where else it was. They were talking about Afghanistan, and they were saying like, what's the difference between Afghanistan and Sudan, and Peter Hitchens was kind of taking him to town over it.
I just don't understand. Like, Sudan is Sudan. I would absolutely evacuate Anglo-Celtic British people from Sudan, and even their wives or husbands. But I wouldn't evacuate anyone else. No one else, because I don't care what happens to Sudan. Sudan's a shithole. It's been a shithole for its own whole entire history, for God's sake.
Weren't so bad when we were in charge, though.
Yeah, it was a little bit better when the British were in charge, I'll grant you. But like, ever since the British have not been in charge, Sudan has basically had a civil war.
Well, the thing is, as well, is that because they were trying to imply that because we were there once, we had a responsibility to these people. But wasn't the Soviet Union involved in Sudan after we left?
Yeah, yep, it was. But the Russians aren't stupid enough to take any notice. Like, they just will ignore it.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say as well, there's quite a.
The West would have probably allowed their passenger planes to go there and then have shot them down and then claimed it was the third world country that did it. That's what the West would have done.
I mean, I kind of, there is obviously a strong distinction between the old Soviet Union and New Russia, but yeah, this is something that's sort of scarcely brought up. That this is always glossed over. That a lot of these countries that they like to point to as having issues, they like to say it was because of Western Europeans specifically being there 100 years ago, and not the Soviets being there more recently. But whatever.
And not like what was happening there 500 years ago.
And not just the way those people are.
Yeah, they didn't always fight each other, honestly. It was just when the whites arrived. Yeah. It's just like all those slaves sold to white slave traders in the 16th century. All those slaves didn't originally live in Africa. And all those slaves weren't going to be kept as slaves in Africa. Although now, if you're honest, which of course you're totally not allowed to be anymore, Africa has more slaves today than it had in 1965 by more than double the amount, even according to the nonsense, which is the World Organization. It's just insane to me. But most Normies don't look that deeply, so they don't get it. So they watch Western news. So, whatever.
Yeah.
Sonny Jim makes a good point in the chat. And whilst a white South African farmer seeking refuge in Australia, the libtard mob were protesting so much. Yeah, they were. Absolutely.
Did that? What ends up? What was the outcome of that? I remember hearing about the Aussies, like the
There's
shit nibs.
there's a fair number of white South Africans in Australia. There's one dude who I visit who is fairly local to me, who does white South African bought sausages and what have you.
Nice.
But it never came about on a large scale. The only country that actually did offer white South African farmers land was Russia. Strange to say.
Yeah.
Strange to say.
This guy you go and visit. I mean, I don't know if this conversation's ever come up, but does he see himself as a refugee or just as a general migrant?
All white South Africans see themselves as refugees, in my opinion. South Africa used to be a really good and viable country, but it's a shithole today because of the ANC. Yeah, Nelson Mandela's organization, and Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. He even admitted he was. So
Well, I mean, the thing is, and this isn't just true of South Africa. You know, a lot of these countries are this way. You know, even Jamaica. Everyone loves to make out that Jamaica's like still just as good as it ever was, but the homicide rate in Jamaica is 20 times what it was when we left.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry,
Mitch.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, the murder rate in Jamaica just before independence was like the lowest in the world.
Yeah.
Contrast to now, it's just gone completely 180.
Yeah.
I mean, I might actually be lowballing it by saying it's gone up 20 times. I think it's more than that. I'm just saying a figure that I know it is at the very least.
Yeah, the British West Indies used to be a very safe place. I mean, and it is today, to be fair, although it doesn't include Jamaica anymore, of course. But yeah, all of this stuff, like Europeans didn't make the world safer. Of course we didn't. We didn't make the world safer for women and children. We did nothing. All we did was like colonialism and evil, and it's all just lies. And it's all just obvious lies, really.
Yeah.
I mean, really, really obvious lies.
And the funny thing is that the sort of anti-white animus doesn't exist to the same extent in a lot of these places that it does domestically. I remember actually, it always makes me laugh, but I remember coming across a message on Facebook that was a happy birthday message to Ian Smith, you know, the former Prime Minister of Rhodesia.
A good man and a former RAF Spitfire pilot in World War II. A good man, absolutely.
And it was on a Zimbabwean Facebook page. And it's just all these black people in the comments saying, like, come back, Ian Smith.
Adam, in the early 90s, my good mate Jan, who was like a four-tracker, his family were four-trackers, and he had this enormous farm in northern Natal. And half of it his dad ran, and half of it he ran. And it was also partly a game farm. So there was all this like antelope and leopard and all sorts of animals running around the place. I loved it. It was so great. I used to go and stay there a lot of times on leave. And his maid, who was a Zulu girl, married Zulu girl with like 2 or 3 kids, I can't remember now. She said to me in about 1995, I wish the white government was back and they still ran us, because she actually got more social benefits from that white South African government than she got from the ANC.
Yeah, I could well believe it. And it's like I mean, someone said in chat, oh, where is it? I think I've lost it. Anyway, someone pointed out that you know, like Jamaica's been asking for reparations.
Well, they should get fucked on that for a start.
Oh yeah, it's Davy 1602. The funny thing is like we had this thing with Barbados recently, right, where they dropped the Queen as the head of state, before her death, before her passing, and but the thing is they'd actually done a referendum of this in Barbados and it had lost, and then the government just did it anyway, because I suppose their government isn't really any different to ours at the end of the day. And
well, I mean, there is a bit, because the British government at the moment is run by Rishi Sunak, who is an Indian banker, never elected by anyone, not even the Conservative Party. Whereas I guess the West Indian government you are talking about was possibly elected by more of the local people. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. But I mean, we live in a democracy, in inverted commas. And if you believe that, you're a bigger twat than I am. But anyway.
Well, yeah, and it's like, that's the thing. And I mean, I think Jamaica's doing it too, but for reparations. I don't know if they're doing the head of state thing, although they might as well. But in all instances,
my thing with Jamaica is she always left of her own accord.
Yeah. But the thing is with any of these places is it doesn't actually matter whether they can get the public opinion behind them or not. They just do these things anyway. When I think Prince William and Kate went over there, they made this big thing about how they were confronted by people demanding something or other. I can't remember if it was reparations or acknowledgement or guilt or something or other. But again, these were just like political actors, right? There wasn't some massive public mob.
Adam, do you know about the British guardship in the Caribbean?
No.
All right,
maybe.
All right, maybe you do. Look, let me just explain for other people. There is a Royal Navy British ship in the Caribbean all the time. And one of the major duties is that when there are typhoons or whatever they call them in the Caribbean, that can, or there are volcanic eruptions or any of these things, which happen on several of I think there's about 8 still British Caribbean islands in the Caribbean, but there are many others that are still in the Commonwealth, of course. And these British warships will be used for that every single time there's a problem, totally paid for by British taxpayers, none of the Caribbean island ones. And I'm in total favour of the 8 or so actually British still islands for that happening, because they're British still islands. Why we should go and help Barbados or any of the other islands, I don't get, to be honest.
I mean, wasn't it as late as like the 90s we were still funding the building of ports and airports in the Caribbean?
Oh no, we still do it to this very day for the around 7 or 8 British still Caribbean islands. Like,
but weren't we also funding? But weren't we also funding the construction of airports in islands that were actually, independent?
Well, yeah, then I would totally disagree with that. We shouldn't do that anymore.
Like, we should just bring them back into the fold and then build their airports.
Yeah, absolutely. if they want to be British islands, I'd say, yeah, okay, we'll help you.
I mean, I wasn't going to ask them, but yeah, no, that too.
I would. Adam and I would say, look, if you want to be a British island again, absolutely, we'll help you pay for your airport or your port. But more seriously, there's 7 or 8 British Caribbean territories, including the British Virgin Islands and what have you. And those guys, I absolutely support Britain helping them build ports and airports. British Virgin Islands is one of the greatest places you can visit in the world.
Yeah.
The local black guys are not at all poor. They're not at all poor. And you can walk into a beach bar in the middle of nowhere and you will not get any shit. I can guarantee it. I've been there several times. I mean, unless you're a total arsehole, of course. I mean, total assholes can get shit anywhere they go. But, if you walk into a beach bar and you say, yeah, I'm from England, these guys will turn around and say, oh, yeah, we're part of Great Britain. And they will, because they're proud of it. And that's great. And I've got no problems with it. But all of these or maybe still Commonwealth Islands who want to get rid of the king and all the rest of it, fuck them. I wouldn't give them a cent. Not a half penny. Not a halfpenny. I wouldn't give them anything. Stuff them all.
Yeah.
But Britain actually spends a quite large amount of money every single year making sure there's a Caribbean guard ship, which, whilst she will first of all do the British Caribbean islands, naturally enough, afterwards we'll go and try and help every single Caribbean island because the Brits are so fucking evil.
Yeah, I mean it is a sad state. Well, a lot, and of course, one of the other things that kind of gets pushed around is that these places, like, they chose to be independent. A lot of these places never even had a referendum. As silly as that would be as well. I mean, I remember reading passages that someone posted from a book called The Imperial Obituary, and they talked about something called the Montague Review, or the Montague Report. And these libs basically complaining at the beginning of the 20th century that less than 5% of Indians actually had any interest in being independent from the empire.
Yeah, and they were all the middle class guys who'd been educated by the idiot British shitlibs. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Tricky Woo says they don't have the media spewing anti-white propaganda 24/7, 365 in the Caribbean yet. Yeah, I actually saw an interesting study a while ago where they showed that Muslims living in America had more anti-American sentiment in them than Muslims in countries America had literally bombed. It shows they also showed in the same study that the more educated you are, the more you claim to have experienced racism, which would be the complete inverse of how racism would work. Yeah, it's obviously a product of indoctrination on a mass scale.
Yeah, it's just a lie. I mean, look, I don't think Americans or Canadians or Australians are all that different. But in England particularly, most English people are far too polite to be very obviously racist. They just are, and always have been. And sometimes to their downfall, I must say.
Yeah.
There are occasions when the English dudes being a bit more racist might have done English better, if I'm really being honest.
Yeah.
I made a tweet I'm not talking in Minecraft.
When they were first talking about diversifying the countryside, when this Mecca sign thing came up that I brought up at the beginning of the show a couple of months back, I think I made a tweet then that was something to the effect of, like, people in the countryside aren't racist enough, but for their own protection, they need to learn to start being racist.
100. Yeah, no, I agree. Look, I just think the huge, enormous, overwhelming amount of anti-white racism in the world today, and in Britain's case, it means anti-Anglo-Celtic white racism. The enormous, huge, overwhelming amounts of that in the world today means that we have to actually become a bit more racist to counteract it. We just have to. I'm sorry, we have to.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm absolutely willing to admit someone like David Kern into being British. I'll take that dude because everything he talks about is British. All right, he's not totally Anglo-Irish, but he is partly, and I will take him.
I suppose there has to be some nuance for mixed people.
Yeah, it does. I do absolutely think it does. And David Curtin is a absolute good example. David Curtin is more pro-Anglo-Celtic than a lot of Anglo-Celtic people are. So I've got to give him why. What else can I do?
Yeah.
I'd be a hypocrite if I said, nah, he's not Anglo-Celtic at all, because he's actually more Anglo-Celtic than many actually real Anglo-Celtic people are. So I'm sorry, and I like his pie, I have to say, and I like his pie's policies for the most part.
Yeah, I don't. I sadly don't think they're going to get much done, but we'll see.
Look, you and I both know that trying to win an election is almost impossible. But I do hope that you and I, come the next election, we will support people like Kern and his pie, more importantly his pie, because we have to do something to stop these twats who are either still going to vote so-called conservative, which is ridiculous, or will somehow think Labour will be better, which is equally ridiculous. The only way good, honest, patriotic, Anglo-Celtic British people can vote at the next election is anyone except the Conservatives, Labour, the Lib Dems, or the Watermelon Greens. You've got to vote against those four pies because they're the standard pie that the world government wants.
On that note, I've actually only just noticed that in that article I was talking about at the beginning, they actually use the term global majority.
Fuck them. There ain't no thing as a global majority. If you live in England, is there a global majority? No, there ain't.
Well, they're talking about non-whites, aren't they? As a global.
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah, everybody except white.
They see it as people of color and then white, which first off goes against the whole capitalizing black and Asian as distinct groups. But it's also kind of weird because they openly talked about minorities earlier on, and they brought up the minority narrative, and now they're basically at the end of the article crying and saying we're the global majority, blah blah blah, do what we say, basically.
Fuck the global majority. The Japanese don't agree with the global majority. Why should the British? The Japanese absolutely reject the global majority. So should the British.
Yeah.
One reason I'm in favour of the old Anglo-Japanese alliance between 1902 and 1922, Britain and Japan are both little island nations on opposite sides of the world who ran, at one stage, quite a lot of the world. And we should both reject this global majority bollocks. I don't care about the global majority. It's people I don't know. However, we have spoken for a long time, and I think I should bring Mitch in on this. Mitch, what do you got to say?
The only other thing I had to bring up was this. I heard about this article from Lotus Eaters where it says why Rishi Sunak may be the most socially conservative prime minister of his generation.
Oh, you killed Duke with that one. That was a good one, though.
Sorry. Carry on.
Yeah, but, I mean,
Jesus Christ.
to try and sum it all up, he's basically saying he talks about the grooming gangs. He doesn't believe in the transgenderism, and what else? Because he's basically just saying, oh yeah, parents should be allowed to know if like their children are being taught about the transgender stuff. And then oh yeah, he didn't disavow Braverman's rhetoric around grooming gangs. Therefore, this government is anti-Pakistani. And then apparently he's more in line with declaring war on drugs, apparently, because he wants to ban nitrous oxide. What else is there?
But isn't this just the Project Red Meat that they're always wheeling out?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just like some article by someone called Jessica Elgott, who I'm pretty sure she's like this insane, roasty, like complete shitloop who thinks that anyone to the left of Chairman, anyone to the right of Chairman Mao is literally Hitler these days. So what?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at all this, and it's just it doesn't even really seem anything really right wing. I mean, what? So he doesn't believe in the Troons, and he's giving off some red meat about the grooming gangs. But aside from that, it doesn't say anything about what does he think about abortion, or what does he think about. I mean, and also he pretty much says also that at this point he's just one of these guys who goes, "Oh well, legal immigration is okay, but illegal immigration, that's the problem." So it's basically Charlie Kirk tier.
Yeah.
Or yeah, it's like listening to Tom Harwood at this point when it comes to the Tory Party, and of course the Guardian screaming, "This is literally Hitler." No.
If only. Yeah, it's pathetic. It's it really is quite bizarre. I mean, isn't that kind of the media working as planned? That it's kind of funny how when they throw this red meat out there, they're able to mobilize the left in such an effective way. It kind of does their messaging for them. Like, I don't think a lot of these people realized that when they were trying to paint, like, let's say Boris Johnson as a far right racist for really mundane comments like Muslims looking like letterboxes and stuff, they probably actually did his campaign quite a lot of favors. And I'm not going to say it's deliberate, but it is kind of a funny sort of feedback loop that happens in British politics all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember who said it was, but like they reckon that YouTube adverts are also wired so that people on the left always get white men in the adverts, like the few white men adverts you get. So it reinforces the perception that we're living in a white supremacist society and all this. But then the likes of us get bombarded with, like Cleopatra and like that Jada Pinkett Smith Cleopatra and all that crap as adverts. So it's just becomes a position where the powers that be corral us into thinking patterns straight off, and it also just energizes both sides into some sort of culture sandwich, basically.
I would be interested to see what the algorithms do with advertising on platforms like Facebook and YouTube and that. But then again, the TV isn't curated by an algorithm, and that does show diverse adverts at all times. So,
Jada Pinkett Smith is the wife, in inverted commas, of Will Smith, the well-known black actor, who cucked him repeatedly, and even cucked him and then had him on a stream that he actually went on where he spoke to the bloke who was having sex with her. And her recent video, which you guys have kind of alluded to, was about cleaning up Queen Cleopatra of Egypt. Now, Queen Cleopatra of Egypt was a northern Greek queen from her father was one Macedon.
Yeah.
Macedon.
The Ptolemaic dynasty.
Yeah. The Ptolemaic dynasty, that was one of Alexander the Great's generals. And she didn't have the least little bit of Egyptian blood in her, let alone any black African blood. So it was a total lie. The whole thing was a total lie.
Yeah, although I'll also point out that even Egypt as a country back then was paler, you could say whiter than it appears today.
Yeah, absolutely, because the Arab invasions under the Muslim shits hadn't yet happened, so they were paler anyway. But yeah, absolutely. But the funny thing, the funny thing is, the only people who complained about it were the Egyptians.
Yeah. But even before that, when you go back to like real ancient Egypt, I remember there being, funny enough, there was a video that used to go around, a clip. I haven't seen it in a long time, and I haven't been able to find it. And it's this sort of black woman in America. This was a long time ago, like in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. When to be a black anthropologist and a woman on TV, you kind of had to be at least halfway competent. She was recounting a study that she'd done, and she was pointing out that one of the things that she found absolutely remarkable was that there was more people in Britain with DNA to the ancient Egyptian linked to the ancient Egyptian pharaohs than there were people in Egypt today.
Yeah, all right, I can believe that. But I mean, I'll give you another one. And there was there was a recent video about the emperor, the ancient Roman emperor Septimius Severus. And the thing is, in the ancient world, there was a artistic license thing that blokes were always shown much, much darker than women. Always. I mean, go and look at any ancient Roman art in Pompeii or wherever you want to go and look at it, and you will see this was the case. Because blokes basically worked outside and got a suntan in the Mediterranean, and women, like rich women, didn't. So were fairly pale. And this dude came up with a picture of Septimius Severus that made him look like a black African. And like Septimius Severus was not a black African, trust me. I mean, for a start, he was at least half Roman. That's how he became emperor. And secondly, even the people he came from in the Carthage region of what was ancient Roman Africa were not black people at all, especially before the Arabs invaded and took over that place. And the same thing goes to the Egyptians. Like the Egyptians were far less black, or even like dark brown, before the Mohammedan invasions took them over. But the only people who complained about this stream about Queen Cleopatra, who was a northern Greek princess and totally white, the only people who complained about it enough to cause any fuss were Egypt.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the Egyptians can, because they're somewhere up there on the progressive stack.
I mean, funny enough, the trailer for that actual show features like some black woman saying, "My mama always told me, I don't care what those history teachers tell you."
I saw that. Just a joke. Well, it would be like my grandfather told me all the Germans were black. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. It's also kind of weird because it's like with that Severus one, that was actually featured on a a British TV show here not that long ago, maybe last year, mid last year.
Surprise.
And it had that big fat like British Lizzo, right, who's in the Sainsbury's advert.
And did they use the rondo, you know, the round painting with his wife?
I
and
don't
his
think
son
they
and
feature anything. I think they just say he was from Africa, and then she's like, "Oh, Africa, we was emperors and cheat and all that sort of stuff."
Yeah, he was from North Africa before the Arabians invaded it, and he was more than half actually Roman, which is
he was a patrician, so he was from like Roman colonial stock anyway.
Yeah, he might have been a fairly dark Italian at best.
Italians were whiter then than they appear now anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true too, because again, there have been subsequent invasions.
Yeah.
Unlike in Britain, by the way. But yeah. Well, until recently. Anyway.
Yeah. So the Cleopatra thing is kind of hilarious. They've been digging at this one for a while. I like to post that sort of joke picture where it's got like the Aryan looking guy with the pharaoh headdress on it's from like a mobile game, and you can see the pyramids in the background. And I just post that to shitlibs, and then don't elaborate, and they really get the arse, and they really get quite mocking and quite defensive about the whole thing.
Surprise. I just despise these people. It's ridiculous, and I despise them. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, in the case of like that Septimius Severus, I mean, there's even that one tale where he reviewed a Roman garrison near York, and he found an Ethiopian there. He demanded that the Ethiopian be deported back to his homeland because he saw it as a bad omen.
Yes, I forgot. Actually, this was what I was going to bring up. They use that. They use that story as proof that there were blacks in Britain for years, so therefore it's a multicultural country. You know, literally one Ethiopian legionary who the emperor was racist
to. Jesus Christ! And like I said, these days you will see leftists trying to pretend he himself, that emperor, was a black guy, which he was no way a black guy. But yeah, it's just nonsense. We should ignore it, I suppose, but we can't because the left goes on about it all the time. All right, guys, I'm not going to go much beyond 2 hours on this stream. So, Mitch, you haven't brought up a first subject yet, so go for it.
Oh, those are my two subjects. If they're just like Sudan and the whole that BS article from the Guardian going about Rishi Sunak being a supposed conservative.
I mean, Rishi Sunak is an Indian banker who was never elected by anyone, but that's just my own opinion. I mean, you know, I don't think Britain has been a democratic country for a couple of years now. I didn't like what's her name, the idiot woman who was in charge before Rishi Sunak, but at least she was elected by the Conservative Party. And went on about cheese, for God's sake. But Britain has been a democratic country for at least, 2-3 years now. If you believe in democracy at all, which I really don't, to be honest. I don't know. And we're about to get the most woke king Britain's ever got. And I'm not even going to watch his coronation. I'm sorry, I'm not. What do you guys think about
that? I think the diverse coronation thing was a bit overplayed, but I have seen that either he hasn't invited or they're not going any major Christian religious figures. So, I'm not sure, but I'm not going to watch it anyway, though. But
I'm not going to watch it. I've just decided I'm not going to watch it. I've heard various people saying they've had arguments with the so-called, in inverted commas, Tory boys. I don't know who the Tory boys are, because I know some people are accused of being Tory boys, who are generally not. But if they come out in favour of King Charles's coronation, I'm sorry, I'm not going to support it, because King Charles is going to be a white king. This is one thing Carl Benjamin is entirely right about. He is. And I'm sorry, I'm not going
What
to
did he
support
say?
that. He said King Charles is going to be a white king.
Oh,
And
right.
he is. It's obvious he is. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to support that. I'm absolute supporter of monarchy in Britain, but not King Charles. We should have passed over him and gone to his son. Like we passed over Edward VII quite rightly, in my opinion, and we should have passed over King Charles III. I think he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we should have passed over him. He's going to be a white king. He's not going to be king for long, I guess, because he's quite old. But yeah, he may even destroy the monarchy in Britain. That's my honest opinion about him. And Tory boys who don't agree, and unlike the vast majority of Tory boys who don't like me, have left long ago. But yeah, I'm not going to support him. I'm not going to watch the coronation.
I mean, I don't know who that refers to, but I'm
Well,
going to wait.
I know 2 or 3 people it refers to, but yeah. But I'm not going to watch Coronation. I'm sorry. I like generally I would. I watched Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II's funeral from start to finish. Like I didn't go to sleep for about 24 hours to watch it. But that was different. I think that was the end of an era. And Charles III is going to destroy the monarchy in the UK, in my opinion. And
I don't think
many people on the left want him to.
Yeah, of course they do. I mean, we need to wait and see, but I do think to an extent, a lot of them didn't like a lot of the people in the regime didn't like what the Queen's funeral did to people. That it sort of like evoked some deep spirit that had sort of been long buried.
Look, I hated the fact that people were cheering the Queen's hearse, because that was like totally.
Well, it wasn't that many people, though, to be fair.
Well, it was a lot.
No, it wasn't.
It was like through most of the route.
No, it wasn't most of the route. It was only a couple of spots.
No, man, I watched it. I
watched it too. It wasn't most of the route.
Well, there was a lot of people doing it, which to me was like, would you cheer at your grandma's funeral? No, you wouldn't. But yet these people thought this was okay to do at the Queen's funeral. It's sad. But yeah, I don't know. Look, I in some ways I liked the Queen's funeral because it did absolutely show loads and loads and loads of real British people coming out and showing their appreciation for Her Majesty. And I'm not Queen Elizabeth II's biggest fan. Don't get me wrong. I think she did a lot of shit wrong during her reign. But the fact, the idea that Charles is going to be all right is like insane to me. Like Charles is totally run by woke leftist climate change bollocks, basically. I don't know what you guys think.
I don't know. I don't really care.
I don't know. I think it's pretty central to Britain, but I mean, that's just me.
Well, I mean, if you replace him with a different king, They're not really central to Britain, then, are they?
Well, look, I'd like him to be replaced by his son, who I think might be a bit more based. But that's just me.
No, I doubt that.
might be wrong. I don't know. I might be wrong.
All I know is that the articles where they were trying to big up the diversity of the coronation seem to be largely the construction of the media, and that seemed to be largely them taking him vastly out of context.
But all right, look, you're an intelligent man. What the fuck has he said over the last 25 years?
What do you mean?
What, in terms of green stuff?
Well, he's an environmentalist,
left-wing?
but he's quite an old school environmentalist, really.
Well, okay. So,
I mean, there's a few bits in there that I don't. But even Prince Philip back in the day used to do a bit of this, where they used to talk about a lot of the sort of anti-humanist stuff, which seems to riddle like the modern elite, and it even infects the royal family. So I'm not like saying my king or anything, but I don't know. I just don't really see it as that big of a deal.
All right, fair enough. Look, I know he was relatively popular when he commanded Royal Navy minesweepers in the 60s and the 70s. Most of his sailors thought he was a good bloke, so that's good. Davey 1602 in the chat says, "It's a bitter pill to swallow for this monarchist. Pack your bags and turn off the light when Britain's done." Davey 1602, Britain ain't never going to be done. We're never going to be done because, how many people have thought we were done and we weren't? That ain't going to happen. So I don't agree with that at all. Charles III could be the worst king ever, and trust me, there's been some bad kings in Britain, but we still ain't done because you will be replaced eventually. So yeah, I'm not going for that. I'm not a total black pill person on Britain. I think Britain's going to survive. I think it's going to be hard.
I just don't understand why people care about this subject so much. It doesn't like one of the things like you were saying about Tory boys earlier.
Yeah.
If I was to take that frame, right, and one of the things that I've seen certain people who could fit that mold saying is that you can't call yourself a monarchist and criticize then Prince but now King Charles. Of course, I think this is kind of a ridiculous paradigm because the whole idea of monarchy is that it's a systemic approach to the organization of society, in that it selects for good traits and it pushes out bad, and it also selects for and incentivizes for good processes. And when you have a monarchy that's like ours, where it's basically a costume monarchy, where it doesn't really matter whether it exists or not anymore, what they actually say is not really the sayings, the trappings, or the actions of an actual monarchy, because it's just like any other woke celebrity saying whatever bollocks. It doesn't.
All right.
It's not important.
Look, I don't think the monarch in the UK is just a celebrity.
I mean, they are now.
Well, they are to the Americans, okay.
I mean, they're pretty close to being a celebrity here.
Yeah, all right. I lost my way with the British monarchy when the whore Princess Diana died. But yeah, look, I was watching a video the other day where serious people were talking about monarchy. And I don't think most of the stuff that people talk about monarchy in Britain anymore is serious at all. But if Britain had a non-white monarch who was absolutely in favor of a more traditional society, which Charles III certainly isn't, but if we had that, then I would support him. And I will often say to people, like in the English Civil War, I would have been a supporter of King Charles and the Cavalier just on principle. Not because I like King Charles, because in many respects I don't, but I like him a lot more than I like Cromwell. So in some ways, it's like, what do the real guys who will fight for you really think? You know. But no one's going to fight for King Charles III. No one is,
because he's a celebrity and not a monarch.
yeah, and he's a lefty. He's absolutely a lefty in most respects.
I mean, he's not that much of a lefty, but he's very much being shaped into one.
Look. The only thing I hope about King Charles III is his son's better. Maybe Harry and Kate might be better, but I don't hold out a load of hope about that. They might be. I hope they are. Like King George IV was a good king. I don't know.
Nennius in chat said there's so much more of a chance of you getting a based monarch than a based PM. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. Look, I'm Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I had a kind of personal base to it because I made an oath of allegiance to her as a very young man, and I took it seriously. But do I think she was a good queen? I think she could have been a better queen. You know, she could have been a more pro-Anglo-Celtic queen than she really was. But Charles III thinks somehow his mum was like some sort of racist, and fuck that shit. It's just ridiculous.
I mean, I don't think he said that, but
I think he thinks it.
I don't know. I don't think that. We'll have to wait and see, though. I mean, nothing's going to really change as far as I can see. It's just a continuation of the same old
downward spiral that we've been in since the Queen's father died, basically.
Yeah. Who was the king of Italy when Mussolini came to power? Was it Emmanuel?
Victor Emmanuel III, I think it was.
Yeah, that was the little one, wasn't it?
He was a very short dude. Yeah, his queen used to call him "my little man."
Yeah, because he was something like he was 5 foot or barely, while she was 5'11". So,
but yeah, and it's like they weren't stopping the downward spiral. They were seeing over it. But when the right guy came along, they sort of I suppose saw an opportunity for a revival, and bestowed him with the power to do it.
Yeah, maybe so. Look, I think it's a shame that Italy lost their king at the end of World War II. Yeah. To be honest, I mean, I think it's a shame anyone loses their king, but Sonny Jim is saying Ashen Duke, Charles the Cuck, maybe. Look, as far as I can work out, Princess Diana, who was a total whore, let's be honest, she just was. Nope. She was a total whore, and Prince Harry ain't Charles's son. That was a British Army officer she'd been having an affair with for a long time. But eventually, Princess Diana went down to having affairs with Egyptian people who ran grocery stores in the UK. I mean, all right, it was a flash grocery store, but it was still a grocery store. But I don't have any room for Princess Diana whatsoever. I am absolutely along with P. Hitchens that was when Britain totally lost its way. Like the nonsense they did for Princess Diana's funeral, it made me want to vomit constantly. And the chick I was with at the time thought it was all right, and she was a whore too. So there we go. I've known quite a few whores, it has to be said, but yeah. So all of that, I would agree with. And look at Charles. I mean, who the fuck did he marry? I mean, that thing is not ever going to be the Queen to me. I'm sorry. Like, it's obviously a substitute mother, I guess. Is the only thing I could say about it. That's a substitute mother, because I don't think Queen Elizabeth II was probably the most loving mum in the world. So Charles married a substitute mother. I can only think, because she ain't cute. So I don't know. Whatever. And he wrote some of the most disgusting things I've ever seen people actually write that you would get published, yeah. Well, there you go. But that's just me. It's only me. And I just look at this stuff as an Englishman and go, these are supposed to be my leaders, But right over, My grandfather wouldn't have done any of those things, even if he'd have thought them. Which I didn't think he would have, but I mean,
On that note, though, I am going to have to head off.
Yeah, we're going to close up, Adam. Trust me.
Okay, I'll hang on to the end then.
I've got a couple of things to plug before we leave. All right. First of all, any final thoughts from you, Mitch?
Nah, not from me.
Any final thoughts from you, Adam?
No, I'm all done.
Anything you want to plug, Mitch?
Not from me, no.
Anything you'd like to plug, Adam, apart from your Bowden Bomber channel, which everyone should go and check out on YouTube?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Fair enough. I'm going to plug my stream tomorrow with Apostolic Majesty, the superstar of history on the right. I'm exaggerating a bit, but not much. I like Apostolic Majesty, and he really does know his stuff. I'm going to be doing a stream of Apostolic Majesty at the same time tomorrow on my channel, and it's going to be about Anglo-Soviet relations in World War II. I'm going to look at the military and naval stuff, and I'm going to leave all of the political stuff to Apostolic Majesty, who is more interested in that stuff than I am. So that might be a fairly interesting stream. Do come and watch it. I did a stream last week with I don't remember this guy's name. I'm terrible. With Rupert August on the Anglo-Japanese Naval Treaty from 1902 to 1922, which you guys might also find interesting. Go and work it out. So yeah, I'll have a quick look to see if we had any super chats, which I doubt. We'll go and check. Nope, we did not. So there you go. Thanks, guys. Coming on the channel. Am lost his voice, says Josephine Herringway. I'm sure I will get it back for tomorrow. Yeah. I've got to go and watch Apostolic Majesty's stream after this one. Which is why I actually had 3.5 hours sleep before I did this. So yeah, go well, guys. We'll see you next week for Splendid Isolation 121. And tomorrow, you can come and watch my stream of Apostolic Majesty about Anglo-Soviet relations in World War II. Go on. And thank you very much to my guests for joining the stream. I'm going to end us with a musical story. Okay, guys, that was obviously from Patriarch Archive, which is a channel you must go and check out. Thank you for joining us. See you tomorrow for the stream with Apostolic Majesty, and next week for Splendid Isolation 121. Go well, chaps, and thank you very much to Alapin and Mitch for joining me on the stream this evening. Good night, people.
Yeah, good night, everyone.